All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome students and young professionals. Just wanted to thank you all for joining us today and for participating in our webinar. Today, we will focus on navigating job searches in the COVID-19 era. So the future, as I think we all know, especially in this era, the one thing that I have noticed is that there's a lot of work for the HR profession, and the future is definitely bright. And it's our responsibility to ensure that we equip our future leaders. Oh, I'm getting an error message here. That's odd, I've never had that happen. Okay, I'm so sorry about that, but we are live and sometimes we do have some technical issues here. But anyway, so today we are here to talk about job searches in the COVID-19 era. And again, just was stating how it's the PHRA's job here to help ensure that our future leaders are equipped with the necessary tools and resources that can help them thrive in this ever-changing environment. I'm very pleased to have with us today an all-star panel of executives that can help to adapt your job search skills to the new business climate. So in this fast-paced and engaging discussion today, we will review interview preparation, how to make your resume as competitive as possible, how to market oneself effectively. We will also learn about the top hiring industries in the Pittsburgh region, and what to expect when you're starting a new position. And so before we do begin, I want to just jump in and kind of highlight who we have with us here today. So today on the call, we have with us Catherine Miller. Catherine is the Membership Development Specialist here at the PHRA. Catherine has a passion for empowering others to grow and to develop to their full potential. We also have Sandy George, who is the Manager of Talent Acquisition for Connective RX. Sandy has spent 20 years in recruiting in a variety of industries, including IT, engineering, purchasing, operations, and many operations. Sandy has worked as both a staffing agency recruiter and corporate recruiter, and is currently the Manager of Talent Acquisition for Connective RX. We also have Patrick Gilchrist, who is the branch manager at Robert Half. Patrick has been in the staffing and recruiting industry since 2004. He was actively involved with the PHRA from 2010 and 2012 until he relocated to South Carolina for 7 years. And last summer, we welcomed him back and he is back involved with the PHRA. We also have Diane Hauser, and Diane is the Employer Relations Manager at Connective RX. Additionally, she is a member of their COVID and re-entry team, handling issues related to COVID-19 and planning how to bring employees back in 2021. Diane has her SHRM CP and Masters in Human Resource Management, and also is a board member for the PHRA. We also have Cheryl Paxton Hughes. Cheryl has over 20 years of experience working in a variety of business management functions, including sales, finance, human resources, IT, and overall business operations. Cheryl began her career at Dick's Sporting Goods as a financial analyst, and she is currently the COO at Edgar Snyder & Associates, Pittsburgh's most recognized brand over the Pittsburgh Steelers. Cheryl holds an MBA from Robert Morris University and a SHRM SCP certification. And lastly, we have Luann Schock, who is the principal at Chesapeake HR Consulting. Luann specializes in leadership strategy and all areas of talent development. She has over 20 years of HR experience, with the majority of those years at a global pharmaceutical company capped off by a multi-year assignment in Europe. Luann also holds the SHRM SCP and SPHR certifications and is a current proud member of the PHRA Board of Directors. So welcome to all of our panelists. And at this time, I'm going to turn the stage over to Luann to start discussing with us interview preparation.
Thanks, Liz. Interview preparation, we'll get started. I got a lot of my slides. I'm just going to hit the highlights and you'll get these slides after, so you'll get all this information. Okay, so next slide, preparing for the interview. Okay, we've got a very short period of time to get across a core message. So prepare, practice, do your homework. No winging it, guys. You're going to work as hard at this as you do at anything else. Make sure you conduct your research. Today, everything's on the internet, so there's no excuse not to know about the company you're going to be meeting with. Know their products, know their reputation, know what's happening in the news. You're going to need that to tailor accomplishment stories and prepare your own questions, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. Lastly, determine who's going to be conducting the interview. I would make a list of questions for the interview scheduler, whoever that might be. But one of the key questions is who's going to be conducting the interview or interviews. Get their names, their titles, their contact details. Try to get that up front. All right. Okay, next slide is preparing for the virtual interview. Not a whole lot different than the in-person, but you've got more to do on the virtual. You want to test your technology. You want to dress for the role. You want to do all the things that you should be doing for Zoom calls, for Google Meets. So for the virtual, just make sure you have all these things going on and give these thoughts. Okay, next slide. Conducting the interview. If you're going in person, arrive a little early. You're a lot less stressed. You want to log in at least 5 minutes early for a virtual. You want to wait for them, not vice versa. Another question for that interview scheduler: how much time for the interviews? How much time with each person? Will you have time to ask questions? Another note on this slide: postpone salary discussions until an offer is made. It's much better to try to discuss a salary once they're interested in you. You have much better negotiation if they're really interested in you. But if you can't put them off, give them a range and make sure you can live with the bottom of that range. All right. Lastly, don't dominate the interview. Keep it interactive. It's a dialogue. You're interviewing them as well as them interviewing you. The next slide is concluding the interview. Make sure all your questions are answered. If they can't do so during the meeting, email them with your questions afterwards. Don't forget, you're interviewing them as well as them interviewing you. You always want to close by highlighting your interest and value to the position in the organization. Even if you decide mid-interview you're not interested, go for it. You want to get the offer. You can always politely decline afterwards. All right. Immediately after the interview, make notes. What worked? What didn't work? You want to use this as a learning experience. And you may be interviewing with a lot of different people and companies. You want to keep them straight. By having good notes, it will help you. And then send follow-up letters. Email is fine. Within 24 hours, an email to each and every person you interviewed with. Make each one a little different. Trust me, they share those thank yous with each other. Okay. Prepare for the tell me about yourself. This is an interview opener or an icebreaker. You're going to see it a lot. Use your elevator speech. If you don't have one, you need one. So prepare. Go out online on the internet. You'll find all kinds of good information. But I've listed on this slide the things that a good elevator speech should include. And this provides a nice framework for the tell me about yourself question. Next slide. Ask the right questions. All right. It's a two-way communication. You need to ask questions as well as receive questions. Prepare questions. It can be about culture, biggest challenges. Make sure one or two of those questions are about broader business objectives. Look at what's in the news. You want them to know you're a business person, you're a professional, and you're very interested in them and have done your homework. All right. And you can always ask for next steps in the interview process. Okay, if we move to the next slide, behavioral-based interviews. Many companies do them today. The good news is if you prepare for this, you're also prepared for what I call a standard interview, which is really based off your resume. But you're going to know you're in one when you hear things like, tell me about a time, or provide an example of. If we can move to the next slide, Liz. You want to prepare accomplishment stories. I'm using an acronym called SOAR. It's easy to remember. It gives you an outline for preparing for interviews. But it's the situation. What situation did you or your team find yourself in? What were the obstacles that you faced? What were the actions you took? And then the results. You can form a nice story around that, what we call an accomplishment story. Next slide. Final word, you want to have a SOAR story for every accomplishment statement on your resume. When you're fairly new in the workforce, you may have a lot of bullets of responsibilities and tasks, you're going to want to change those over to accomplishments as you move through your career. So you want to have a source story for each accomplishment on a resume, but you also want to go through the job postings looking for skills, competencies, abilities, things like we want a team player, we want a good communicator, we want a critical thinker. You want to have a source story for each one of those key skills, competencies, or abilities. And once you prepare your source stories, practice them. You want them to roll off your tongue seamlessly. Okay, nonverbal behavior. Sincere, smile, make eye contact, know where your camera is on your computer. You want to dress appropriately. Another question for that interview scheduler: what is the company dress code? And if you don't know, always err to the more conservative. You want to show interest and optimism and enthusiasm. Just let them see your energy. Don't be over the top, but you want to have energy. And finally, interviewers often make immediate judgments. Make sure your first impression is that of a professional. And my last slide is on tips and techniques. Be confident rather than concerned with rejection. If you do your homework, if you prepare, you practice, then just go for it. All right. Never be critical of a past employer or employee, even if they seed you with a question about when did you have a difficult supervisor. Always turn it around to say, well, we got past this and we did this and we ended up on a really good note. Always turn it into a positive. So never be critical. Admit if there's something you don't know. No one knows everything. On the other hand, if you don't know every question, guess what? You're not going to get the job. All right. And my last comment there, and it's not because I'm an HR person, but never underestimate the influence of anyone involved in the process, even if it's the receptionist, the front desk, or the interview scheduler. Everyone may have a say. And as long as you're friendly and you treat everyone with respect, you're on a good start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luann. There was lots of great information packed into those slides. And for those that are viewing, we will be circulating these slides to you today after the presentation so that you can make some notes and jot down that great information. So thank you again, Luann. And Sandy, we are right next up. You're up on deck here for us. So
all right, great. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
Great tips, Luann. I don't know if you saw me nodding my head the whole time. So I want to share some tips with you on how to make your resume competitive and stand out. If you look at I have my screen minimized here. So if you want to bounce to the next slide, I just want to show those resumes. Great. So I have two resumes here that I wanted to show you. One you can clearly see is, in my opinion, the more professional, easy to read resume. That's Jessica's over on the right. And you'll probably notice that when that slide popped up, your eye magically goes right to that. It's much more eye-catching and easier to read. It's very organized. It's easy to jump from section to section. So let's just break that down quickly here. You can actually, Liz, leave that slide up so that people can continue to see that as I read through the other things. So first and foremost, keep it simple, right? You'll notice on Jessica's resume on the right there that she has clear section headings that stand out, plenty of white space, making that resume easily readable. She also used a summary statement, which you'll notice there, rather than an objective. Summary statement is where you can, in just a sentence or two, highlight your experiences, how they're relevant to the position that you're applying for. Note I said how they're relevant to the position that you're applying for. It's going to highlight just a little bit of information that's going to be further discussed down in your resume. So here you want something that's going to make the reader want to continue to read down and see your experiences and the things that you've done in each of your either internships or positions or what have you. Summary statements should personalize to the job that you're applying for and for the company that you're applying to. So call out that position title and how, again, in that sentence or two, your skills or your experiences can relate to that position. You want to customize your resume for each position that you're applying for. It doesn't have to be a completely new resume. Review the job description, take notice of what skills or what responsibilities seem to be the most important in that job description. Those are typically listed first. And then adjust your resume to reflect those same skills, if you have them, to be listed first on your resume. So if you're looking at your skills section, you want those most important skills on top. Same with your list of responsibilities or the bullet points in your resume. Have those the items that speak specifically to that position listed closer to the top of that job summary. Research has shown that 60% of hiring managers and recruiters pay attention to whether resumes are customized to their open positions. So this is definitely something that I think can help set your resume apart. So again, thinking about those two resumes, Jessica's is much more pleasing to the eye than that paragraph format that you see on the left there. So it's a good idea, in my opinion, to stay away from that paragraph format. You want something that's easily readable, something that people can jump from section to section without having to navigate and scroll through a million sentences. So the one thing that I think is also important to note is that resume reviewers, generally recruiters, human resources managers, even hiring managers, typically spend about 10 seconds skimming a resume before they decide if the resume is even worthy of consideration. We see a lot of resumes come through. Sometimes it's 100 or more resumes per position. So in order for us to get through that process, we can't really spend a lot of time digging through to find the data. So we need it to be easily available to us to kind of scroll through quickly. Another tip, do not abbreviate or use acronyms without spelling it out at least once. What I mean by that is HRBP, right? Generally, we're going to know what HRBP stands for if we're in human resources. But if you have a resume reviewer who isn't familiar with that terminology, they might not know what that is, or a system might not pick that acronym up. So my suggestion would be the first time you use that, human resources business partner, in parentheses, put that HRBP, and then you can use HRBP throughout the rest of the resume. Not everyone is going to know what those acronyms stand for, so you want to make sure that they do understand, especially if it's industry relevant, but not necessarily relevant to everyone who's going to first look at that resume. My biggest tip, if you walk away with nothing, walk away with this. Once you have your resume completed, proofread it for grammar, proofread it for spelling issues, and then have somebody else do it. And then have one other person do it. If you type in and put INN accidentally, it's not going to come up in your spell check. You want a fresh set of eyes that's going to look at that resume and pick out any of those things that you might have missed. 77% of hiring managers will disqualify a resume if it has typos or bad grammar. So this step is key to being considered for an opportunity. Another tip, when you save your resume, save it first name, last name, and either resume or first name, last name, even better, company name, because again, if you're going to customize that resume to suit that particular opportunity that you're applying for, you want to make sure that you don't submit that resume to another customer or to another position. You want to make sure that you have that resume specific for that particular company. I've looked at a million resumes, and I can't tell you how many times I've had a resume come through with that summary and it lists the wrong company and the wrong title for the position that they're applying to. So that speaks to somebody, not necessarily being as detail oriented as we would like. And it is a very important step. It also is helpful for you. So when you are prepping for that interview or you're getting ready to walk out the door for that interview, you can pull up that resume and print that resume and take that with you. You know that's the exact resume that you sent to that position. Another suggestion that I think really bounces off what Luann said was save a copy of the job description for the positions that you're applying to. Sometimes we might pull down the job posting before your interview. So if you have the job posting, you can prep with that, and then you can have your resume, the job description with you, so you can have all of your questions ready before you get to the interview process. And last but not least, we've talked about how you can organize your resume, space your resume, save the resume. Let's talk about the meat of your resume. 3 key areas: growth, reduction, and impact. What does that mean? Companies want to know, how can you help them grow? How can you help them save or reduce? And how can you help to impact their business? So coming out of school, you might not have a lot of experience behind you. Think about the technologies or the tools that you used. Think about the projects that you've worked on, and highlight the areas that you feel that you've either helped a company or helped potentially save an organization through money, through time, or some other advancement. Time probably isn't for growth, but how you can help reduce time, save them money, or how you can, like I said, impact their business. So keep that in mind. Last tip, add volunteer experience. A lot of people don't think that that's relevant, but more and more people want to see that people are investing their free time in helping others, or, you know, volunteering for some sort of organization. So if you have it, list it. It's absolutely helpful. Last but not least, just recap, keep it simple, keep it organized, and spotlight your value.
Sandy, before we move on, there was one question that came up in the chat. So when is it appropriate for somebody to have a resume that is over 1 page?
That's a great question. I would say probably, I think it depends on obviously how many positions you've had, but I would expect that someone with just a year or two of experience would probably only have a 1-page resume. I would bet to say that until you get into that 2+ years of experience, again, you know, depending on how many positions you've had, if you've had a lot of temporary positions, you might be okay going over 1 page. I wouldn't make it a book. This is just a highlight. This is just the bait to get into the interview, and that's where you're going to want to really speak to all of your qualifications and the things that you've done. So this is really just highlights.
All right, well, thank you very much for all your tips there. Let me just advance through here till we get to Cheryl's portion of the, and again, these slides will be sent out to everybody, so you'll get to see all of those great notes on there as well. I believe that Cheryl is next, or was going to be next, but it looks like the slides are pulling up to Patrick. So Patrick, did you want to go now to talk about top hiring industries in the Pittsburgh region?
Sure can. Thanks a lot. Adjust and improvise, right? You already said it. When you're live, you just go with it.
Thank you.
Well, hey, good afternoon, everyone. Given what a challenging year 2020 has turned out to be, I, for one, am glad it's time to turn the page and start looking ahead to 2021. So today I'm going to cover what positions are in high demand right now here in Pittsburgh, but also what we project will be hot in 2021 as well. We at Robert Half have been closely following essential and non-essential companies throughout the city. And so I'll be going through some industries, not companies, but some industries that we are working with right now or continuing to follow closely in hopes of working with soon. So we'll go to the next slide. The pandemic has caused unprecedented disruption in 2020. There's still a lot of uncertainty. I mean, especially with continued increasing cases. We've got a new stay-at-home order that goes into effect in about 12 hours. And it's causing many companies to look differently at staffing and recruitment and hiring. But there's good news. Many businesses have been resilient through the pandemic. However, even those have become more selective when hiring. And we've seen direct examples. I've worked with clients before the pandemic that have had a certain hiring process. And now that we get into the pandemic, it's completely changed, become a lot more strict. So be ready. Be ready to search hard and compete hard for the opportunities that you're going to go after. And also one other quick note before we move into the actual industries. Be prepared to answer the question about, are you comfortable working remotely? Are you comfortable working a hybrid schedule? And are you comfortable working on site? It's the most important question that I ask the clients that come to us and the candidates that I'm looking to get out to work. So if you haven't really given thought to that, it's definitely will be one of the top questions. All right, so let's get into it. Slide 3, the absolute hottest industry right now that we are seeing hiring is in the nonprofit sector. Might not have been the answer you were thinking of, but we are following the CARES Act money. So just real quick, the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It's about, $2.2 trillion that was signed into law earlier this year at the beginning of the pandemic. This is money that needs to get to the people that need it. And so in order for that to happen, it's got to be applied for, reviewed, awarded, and then ultimately audited for fraud. So what is it driving? It's driving accounting entry-level roles, specifically a new job title, rent relief analyst. Guys, everything is changing. What happened before March of 2020 is almost null and void. And so, but it's also driving administrative needs. It's driving data entry, customer service, as well as HR. HR positions, Liz mentioned it in her intro, now more in demand, and unfortunately, stressful and important, more so than ever. And then finally, as I said, audit. You're probably hearing or have heard there was an individual in Florida who took his CARES Act money and bought a Ferrari. Well, that's not exactly the need. That's not exactly what they're looking into. So fraud, unfortunately, is running rampant. So that's the non-for-profit space. So let's go to the next slide and talk about finance, banking, and the mortgage industries. Another really hot industry. So I'm going to go back in time to the beginning of the pandemic. You may have heard the Small Business Act, SBA, also drove funds, whereas the CARES Act portion drove funds to the individual that needs it. The SBA, the small business, got funds to the companies. And there was something called the Payroll Protection Program, the PPP, that also drove a whole lot of work at the beginning of the pandemic. Now what we're seeing is the backside, the audit portion that I explained just a second ago. But here's the thing. We're expecting more money to be released shortly after the inauguration, perhaps a little bit sooner from what we're hearing right now. But we're expecting more funding to release. And you know what that's going to do? It's going to start the cycle all over again. Then what we also, and again, what this is driving loan closing and processing. Right now, you can't find someone with loan closing experience. Right now, we have remote workers from all over the country helping Pittsburgh businesses because there's just not enough of those people. So what I think we're going to start to see next year is we're going to see an increase in entry-level roles for a good opportunity to get into a really hot industry. So Liz, I think if you can back up to my healthcare pharmacy is next. One more, I think, back up. There we go. So as you could probably imagine, healthcare is a huge opportunity. It may not even have been something that you ever saw yourself getting into, but the roles are accounting and financial related, but also customer service for COVID command centers. Also patient intake. There was a suspension of elective procedures in many health systems, and that caused a traffic jam of scheduling and rescheduling of appointments, bringing on extra workload. Lastly, medical coding and billing. Unfortunately, with the vast increase in hospitalizations, the workload is just beginning at this point for medical coding and billing roles. The last one I'll talk about today is government. Now, it kind of ties back a little bit to that CARES Act money. Again, we're following that CARES Act money. One example I'll share is through housing authorities. Rent Relief Act money is being funneled directly to the housing authorities. And it's kind of funny when you look upline to what I shared in the nonprofit section. These nonprofits are busy because housing authorities are strapped. They cannot process enough applications fast enough. Currently, the Rent Relief Act expires on 12/31. Now, that's already one extension from 11/30, likely will be extended again, but housing authorities are tapping local nonprofits to help process these applications to get the money where it needs to be. Accounting and finance, customer service, again, following the CARES Act money. So jump into the next slide. For those with information systems backgrounds, I've added this slide just to help you a little bit with your keyword job searching, if you will. Tech is not my personal area of focus, but I know it's a hot sector of the economy, and it's going to continue to be so for years and years and years to come. So slide 8 is a funny one. It's what I call the alphabet soup slide. There's just letters everywhere, but it's a good reference from a continuing education perspective for you. Top IT certifications sought by IT hiring managers. I've seen and worked with a lot of job seekers that unfortunately found themselves unemployed or in transition throughout the pandemic. And I'm hearing a lot of folks have taken that time to invest in themselves with more education, more credentials. So I figured I would throw this slide in, although I don't, can't really talk intelligently about much of that. So I'll wrap it up by inviting everyone to check out roberthalf.com for some more information. This is really just the tip of the iceberg I wanted to share with you today. Also, consider contract or temporary work as a way to get your foot in the door. You capitalize on the recruiter's relationships and reputation in the market. These are unprecedented times. Your first job might not be your dream job, but gaining work experience and a little bit of cash are both very valuable assets right now. So Liz, that is it for me today. I think I'm on time, so I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. And yes, you are perfect on time there. And now we will just circle back here to Cheryl. Cheryl, if you would like to jump in and tell us how we can market ourselves effectively as possible.
Sure, no problem. So what I thought is I would try to make this pretty succinct and give you guys 6 specific steps. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk through 6 ways to market yourself. Liz, if you want to just jump right down to step 1, which is the first step, which is branding yourself. So this is a common term that, I don't know, at least I've heard throughout my career, like, oh, you need to brand yourself. And it's like, well, what does that mean? I'm not a product. Well, you kind of are a product. So when you think about branding in the marketing sense, right? A company is trying to really achieve 2 objectives when they think about what their brand is. It is what's the value they're providing to their market, and then how does that differentiate from their competition? So that's essentially what you're trying to figure out when you think about how to brand yourself so that you stand out in the market for prospective employers and prospective roles, and how are you different than maybe other candidates? So I would encourage you, if you're struggling with this concept like I was, to introspect and ask yourself these 4 questions. And it really has to play to your strengths. So I'm assuming a lot of people on this call's major may have been human resources. It might be something else. But why did you choose that major? What were things that you were passionate about? What are things that you're naturally good at? So for me, for example, I had a lot of feedback early on in my career that I had high initiative and I could be trusted to execute things. So that's sort of how I branded myself when I would go into future interviews, because I knew that that was something that I was good at doing. So I would ask yourself those questions in terms of trying to define that. Step 2 of marketing yourself, if you want to go to the next slide, Liz. This is probably the most important information I'll say for today, which is really maintaining a strong online presence. And I'm going to say LinkedIn is the platform for this. So you need to develop a LinkedIn network. And so, well, how do you do that if you're, fresh out of school and you don't have a lot of professional contacts? Well, you have to make a concentrated effort. And I suggest that you try to connect with 3 to 5 new people a day, and not random people, right? You're not just trying to connect with anybody. You're trying to connect with people who are perhaps in an industry or in a profession that you are trying to get a foot in the door in. 50% of those people, I'll be honest with you, are going to ignore your connection request because they're not going to know who you are. But the other 50% will actually accept. And so if your goal is 3 to 5 a day, that will really help to build up your network. And a really good tip is to send them a note when you're connecting with them to let them know why you want to connect with them. That will also help them to accept your invitation versus just getting this blind connection from somebody I have no idea who they are. So I would recommend that you, to the extent that you can be a little creepy and research their profile, find out a reason why you want to connect with them, and then just put that right into the message when you send to them. Also, posting content. So as you build up your network, you want to make, so just like a brand, right? You're making impressions in the marketplace. You want to make impressions online. So posting content is a great way to keep your name up in a feed. And this doesn't have to be net new content that you've developed. If you like to write and you're creative and you want to do that, perfect. But if you're not, steal somebody else's content. If there's a great article, if there's a piece of research that resonates with you and obviously is applicable to the career field you're going into, repost that. And again, that'll just help to get your name recognized, so that when you do submit a resume, maybe the recruiter will be like, oh, why does that name sound familiar? Oh, I've seen that on my LinkedIn feed. The next step is around how to develop a network. And I added during COVID, this is obviously difficult because we're used to being able to do face-to-face networking events. But to the extent that you can participate in virtual networking conferences, the PHRA just had a 2-day annual conference back in October. There are a lot of presenters, participants. If you can get lists of people that are going to be attending and you can research them and make a point to connect with them, a lot of times you'll have like these virtual lobbies that you can chat with people in. Do that. I would say if you really can't get a list of participants because the conference venue just is not providing that, try to at least connect with the presenters. They are for sure going to be much more easier to connect with. A lot of times they'll provide contact information and they're going to be networked. So they can help you connect with others. And that stands for today, by the way, if you want to connect with me afterwards. I'm happy to try to help you. And just remember, networking is a two-way street. So you're not just sucking from somebody. You want to also give back. And you might think, well, what do I have to really give back? I'm not experienced, but there's a lot of things you could give back. And, you could ask if there's any volunteer opportunities associated with the organization, or is there any temporary work, or, is there anything, and you can just flat out ask the person, how could I give back to you? What's important to you? So just make sure you're always offering something in return. The next step is, and this was kind of highlighted already in some of the other presentations, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but you obviously, if you are in front of somebody who's a decision-making or a hiring manager, you need to really demonstrate how your skills are going to help the company. So what is it about, again, going back to how you're branding yourself? And I've done this in the past before on job interviews. I've come in with a portfolio of actual work that I've produced, whether it's been writing samples, PowerPoint presentations, a project plan. Now, maybe you don't have those things from actual work experience, but you probably have some of those products, at least from being in school. So think about how you can take those. I will tell you, and hopefully for the recruiters on the line here today, employers love when they see an actual work product, because now they can see what you actually can do, not just hear what you say you can do. So I think that's really critical, and it's always at least been successful for me. The next step is around conducting research. Again, this was already brought up. Here's the big point on this. You need to know how the company you're interviewing with makes money at the end of the day, right? That's what's important. You can do a bunch of research, but if you don't understand how they make money, you're not going to be able to talk about how your role contributes to that. So the bottom line is you have to understand how they make money, and then what is it your position is doing to help enable that. May not be a direct revenue position like sales or marketing, but at the end of the day, so if you're, for example, interviewing for a recruiter position, right? Well, if that company is experiencing double-digit growth, or if they're in a growth field like Patrick just mentioned, you're going to find them talent that's going to help them actually continue that revenue growth. That's a critical role in the company. So think about how to make that connection. And then the last step is also becoming an expert in the industry in which you're applying to. So we've talked about healthcare on this call. You know, if you are applying to a healthcare industry, you know, and even within healthcare, what's the specific vertical? Is it a payer? Is it a provider like a hospital? Is it pharmacy? What is it that is in that vertical? Understand that market, understand if it's shrinking, if it's growing, because then you're going to understand some of the pressures that your prospective employer is dealing with. And again, it goes back to how do you demonstrate value, right? If I know these are the struggles in this industry, I know this is what's facing them, how can my role help with that? So in summary, just to conclude, the 6 steps are: develop your own personal brand, maintain a strong online presence. I'll add LinkedIn specifically. Try to meet as many people and connect with as many people as you can at networking events. Demonstrate how your skills are going to help add value to the company. Research. Remember, how do they make money? And then become an expert in the industry you're applying to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. I appreciate that. All right, Diane, are you ready to bring us home with what to expect when starting a new position, especially in the COVID era?
In the COVID era, absolutely. Well, I just want to say great advice from Luann and Sandy and Patrick and Cheryl. Wonderful points of information for you there. And if you follow the advice they give, hopefully you're going to have nailed that interview, gotten the offer you wanted, accepted the job. Congratulations. Now what? Now comes the part where you become part of that company. And the experience that you're going to have in the COVID era is going to be vastly different than your parents or even older siblings who are out in the work world. So you need to be prepared for things to be a little bit different. You may not have them as a point of reference. The good news is you do have HR there to help you every step of the way. And if you're going into HR and that's the field that you're pursuing, not only are you entering it as an employee, but as part of an HR team. So you're kind of looking at it from both perspectives. But I want to focus on 5 things today that I think are going to be a little bit different for you, that were different from all of us who are already holding our positions. So we'll head on to our next slide. Two of the first things, drug tests and background checks. You know, you've done the interview, you've gotten that job. Congratulations, yay. Now the company is going to want information from you. If you're going into the medical profession, and there's a lot of that around Pittsburgh with UPMC, Allegheny Health Network, Blue Cross Blue Shield, you may be required to have a drug test or a TB test, something like that. You may find that it's a little bit more difficult for you to get those tests and to meet the timeframes that's expected. So be prepared to work with your recruiter if you hit any obstacles. Often when a drug test is required for a position, there's a time limit on how long you have to complete it. If you try to go and you can't get in because the facility you went to is doing a lot of COVID tests, or you have to have an appointment or something, you may hit an obstacle. Reach right back out to your recruiter. Let them know. Don't think they're going to just automatically know what happened to you. Explain the situation, work with them on how to mitigate that and move forward. A similar thing with background checks. You know, there are a lot of different companies doing this, you know, not just in Pittsburgh, but across the nation. You maybe need to be a little bit patient, that it may take a while for all these things to come back for you to get that go ahead and be notified of when your first day is going to be. So again, when you encounter problems, work with your recruiter. Even if you know who your supervisor is going to be, and maybe it's a smaller company or maybe a smaller nonprofit you're going into, don't reach out to that manager. Work with the recruiter. Once you get onboarded and are passed on to that working relationship with the manager, then you want to start that, not having to worry about any of these other pieces. Let the recruiter and the onboarding team take care of this and work with you. So moving into some of the big things that I think are going to be the difference here. I'm calling them COVID complications because COVID has really complicated the way that we onboard people and how we're working in general for all of us. So as you know, with COVID-19, the cases are they're skyrocketing. Many states have legislation they've put in place or guidelines they've put in place. In fact, last night, Pennsylvania put out some updated guidance, as Patrick had mentioned, that will go into effect tomorrow on the 12th. You might be hired, as Patrick did mention in your interview, maybe you're asked, do you want to be remote? Can you come in and be essential? Are you willing to do a hybrid where maybe a certain number of days are in office and other days are remote? You should know going into your interview what would be the most optimal for you. And if you had to do one you maybe weren't anticipating, how could you could adjust and be prepared? So if you are hired into a position that is automatically remote, understand up front, some things may be asked of you. You may be asked to show proof of high-speed internet to show that you're able to get on and connect, that you have a private workspace or as private as possible, especially if you're working with, maybe you're going to be doing payroll. Maybe you're going to be working with, PHI, insurance information, anything that would be private. The company is possibly going to ask you to show that you can demonstrate a quieter space. You may be even asked if you have homeowners or renters insurance in case there's an accident to the equipment. Anticipate those things if you might need them. It's very likely you'll be asked to sign a remote work policy before you even start. And you should be aware that there may be provisions in that remote policy. If you have children, or maybe you're in a big family and there are a lot of kids around, and those kids suddenly are appearing on the Zoom meetings, you may have HR talking to you about that. If you live with grandma and grandpa and they want a martini every 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's on your afternoon meeting, you might have someone talking to you. Do also be aware that many companies, when they give you their equipment, ask you to sign off in some way on their policies. I know in our company, when we go to sign on in the morning, we click an acknowledgement. There's a lot of software out there that companies can employ that know literally how long it takes you to type the word "the." So if you are doing maybe data entry and it's expected that you have 2,000 things you enter every day, and you're saying, oh, I can't get it done, and you haven't encountered any tech problems, your company may know how long it takes you to get work done. Be prepared for that, and you should know that up front. Companies may have policies on use or non-use of cameras while you work. That's another thing you should know about remote. If you're in remote status and you're asked to download apps onto your phone, be careful of looking or working on your phone, because there could be confidential information there that you don't want to expose, especially if you're in HR. So that's another thing to think about in that remote status. Moving on to the next slide on complications. If you're designated as essential, and that designation has a very specific and legal definition right now of who can and can't be in an office. So if you're designated as essential in-office worker, your onboarding experience could look very different than someone who is remote. You may be asked to take part in daily attestations. And I know many of us have probably encountered these when you go into, well, like for instance, I like to get my nails done. Before I go to the nail salon, I have to click this thing and attest I don't have a fever, I haven't been around anyone who's sick, and several other things. You've probably encountered these already just in your regular life, even on a college campus where maybe your temperature's being taken. Your company is very likely to have some process in and around that for you to be essential in office. Make sure you know what it is and you follow it, because if you don't, it could mean that you're blocked out for the day. You don't get paid, and suddenly your manager's calling you saying, why didn't you do your attestation? Why can't you come in today? Be prepared. You also should know that in Pennsylvania, we do have a strengthened mask order. You're going to be required to wear a mask indoors at all times. That is a difference from how it used to be. You used to be able to take it off when you were in, in a distant space from others. Now you do need to keep it on. When you're hired, you may be asked to disclose any travel with the holidays coming, especially. How you're going to use your PTO time could affect other people in the office. If you're traveling out of state and want to come back and suddenly you find that HR, or you have to tell people as HR that they're quarantined, you need to know that. You need to be prepared. The bottom line is we need to keep ourselves safe and others safe by following those basic CDC guidelines of washing your hands and social distancing, all those things. Also, as an essential in-office person, I would recommend that you hold off on bringing, decorations or personal items. And I know on Pinterest, there's all kinds of boards about cute things you can put up in your office and how to make it look nice. But if you get called in and then suddenly something happens and you're sent out, all your personal things are in there and you may not have access to them for a while. So maybe hold off on a lot of those things until later when we're all able to come back in and work together. I do recommend you take your laptop home every night. What happens if you go home at night and next morning you get a text from your manager saying, wait a minute, there's COVID in our building, work from home, and you don't have your laptop. Suddenly this is a problem. So if you're able to take it home, do take it with you just as a precaution. If you're hired into HR, you need to be aware of any legislation that affects the company. I know, as Patrick had mentioned, there's a lot that is affecting who's hiring, but there are other ones like the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, that affect how we handle things in HR. I've been attending this week, the PHRA has an employment law conference. We've been attending virtually. And recently there was, a session on even updated I-9s. What's the approach during COVID? If people are looking for immigration, how does that work? How do you handle all of these things, FMLA, the things we see constantly in HR? You need to be at least familiar with it, try to educate yourself, or working with your team to learn your company's approach. And anyone in HR needs to be prepared to handle returning to work. Vaccines. What if people refuse to get vaccinated? What if there are people who can't get vaccinated? There's a lot of uncertainty right now around that. So make sure that you're working with your team or your HR representative on that. So moving on, we'll talk briefly about onboarding, because it's going to look different as well, depending upon if you're remote, hybrid, or an essential in-office person. I know most of us are used to handling things, paperwork, through email and online. We're comfortable with that. But what if your first day includes pulling up to your company and someone runs out, drops your equipment in your trunk, and you drive off and go home and have to set up? Your orientation might be in a classroom 6 feet distance from others, and someone on a screen or distant in front of you orienting you, or maybe you're just sitting at your new desk alone and you're logged into Teams or Zoom and you're getting your orientation there. It is very, very different looking right now during COVID. So be prepared for that. You especially need to know how you will react to that when you're either alone trying to learn and be onboarded or with others. Be prepared for your, welcome aboard, not to be coffee and donuts with the team, but maybe it's a packet of hand sanitizer and wipes and a company logo mask. Or you can't go to lunch with everybody. Maybe it's a virtual lunch because your new team wants to get to know you, but it has to follow guidelines and regulations. However your onboarding looks, remember, this is your opportunity from the get-go to build foundational relationships and demonstrate how you're going to be a good teammate and add value to the team. So jumping on ahead to the next slide, training is a big part of that. I know the picture here is showing two gentlemen very close together. That would never happen now. That would not be allowed. Our legal department would come and get us if we had that happening in our company. So be prepared that you may be training distantly. Know your learning style. Are you a visual learner? Are you auditory? Are you experiential? Know what that looks like for yourself, so that if you're running into trouble and having obstacles, you can speak up early. don't wait for things to go off the rails or for you to be encountering difficulties. Speak up. People are understanding and they're going to want to bring you on in the most positive manner they can. So let your manager know if you're having any troubles. Think about how you're going to develop those relationships with your manager and possibly subordinates. You never know if you have to be socially distant or do it virtually. I also recommend that you know the hierarchy of your team and this organizational structure. It's easy when we are in an office to walk down the hall and say, "Hey, Susie, who do I talk to about onboarding paperwork?" Someone would tell you right then and there. Right now, it may take a series of emails to get to that information as a new hire. Hopefully, your team that brings you on is going to help you with that up front. But if they don't, be prepared to email to get that information. So in terms of emailing, also be prepared to be proactive, but waiting for responses, but not waiting too long. It's really a fine line. You don't want to be too pushy, but you want to be collaborative. So make sure you find that sweet spot and make sure you know the expectations of your team. So going on to my last slide here, I just want to finish by saying, if you're going into HR, PHRA is the place for you. Absolutely. This is where you're going to get the most information on all these critical issues, the legislation, learning development, networking, all of that through PHRA. We are very closely affiliated with SHRM. And by, being part of the PHRA, you really can help to, build a good foundation, a good career for yourself. So I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll hand it back to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Diane. And thank you, Luann, Patrick, Sandy, Cheryl as well, for all of the great knowledge and expertise that you shared with us today on how to navigate job searches in this COVID-19 era. So we would like to raffle off, donated by the PHRA Board of Directors, we would like to raffle off 2 student memberships. But before we go through and do that, I wanted to give the students the opportunity to ask the panelists any questions that they might have. We have a few minutes here, so if there's anybody that either wants to unmute themselves and address the panelists with a question, or if you want to type it into chat, please go right ahead. This is your opportunity. Here is one question. Let me just read this here. So when do you think you should bring, this question is for Luann, and says, when do you think you should bring up the question of whether a job is remote or not, especially if it is not specified on the job description?
Well, I'd open it up to everybody to answer. I mean, I think the earlier the better, quite frankly, because I think it's a big, question. I mean, why go further if the job requires you to be in the office and you don't feel you can be in the office, or vice versa? It wants you to work remotely and you feel like you can't. So my feeling is that would be one of the upfront questions that you would ask if it wasn't clear. So I'll throw it to any of my colleagues.
Luann, it's Patrick. I would agree 100%. We have specific instructions for every one of our recruiters across the country to be very specific, not just about remote or non-remote, but specific about what the expectations are. If it's hybrid, what does that mean? So it should be one of the very first questions right up front. Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Anybody else have any questions? It's a shy group today. You guys did do an excellent job providing lots of information, so you addressed all the questions before. So Catherine, I'll turn it over to you so you could raffle off our membership winners.
Great. All right, thank you. So just as Liz had mentioned, we're raffling off 2 complimentary student memberships. So everybody listed on the call today, their name is on a piece of paper and in this bowl to keep it fair. So I'll just shake this up. And our first winner of the complimentary membership is Chandler Cersei. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but congratulations, Chandler. We'll be in touch. I'll be in touch via email with more information about how to access your new membership. And our second winner is Courtney List. Courtney. So congratulations, Courtney. I'll also be in touch. So congratulations again to both of our winners.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you goes out to our PHRA Board of Directors for sponsoring those 2 new members. So welcome to the association, and I look forward to seeing the 2 new members on some of our virtual events and hopefully towards the end of the year here somewhere in person. This is your last chance. Anybody last minute questions? Just check the chat. All right. Everybody
Hey,
is saying yes.
Liz, it's Luann. When you send out the presentation, maybe you can include our contact email,
Sure.
those that presented, because you may not have a question you can think of immediately, but maybe some of you will come up with questions after the fact, especially after you review this information. I think we'd all be happy to answer questions that might come up.
Perfect. Thank you, Luann. You guys are to the students, you are a very lucky crew because these panelists are excellent, and I know that they would all be right there for you if you have any questions. So just thank you all for participating today. Thank you so much to the panelists, the students, and to the students. Just remember that the profession is bright. The HR profession is bright, as well as all those other opportunities that Patrick had mentioned. So just by showing up today and participating in this program, you have shown that you have the drive that's necessary to thrive in your early career. So stay positive and have a safe, happy holiday season, and good luck to everybody, and stay in touch with us. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.